Thank you everyone for joining in. I know it's difficult to have a session after the closing ceremony, but the good part is, at least I'm convinced whoever is here is actually genuinely interested, and that's why he's here or she's here. So thank you for joining us. We have a very interesting conversation that we're planning, and we have a very interesting panel as well. We always talk about climate tech investing and the next set of unicorns actually coming from climate tech. But it's a very different kind of investing as compared to the whole consumer tech and the fintech and all that we are seeing, right? Because a lot of the effort in this type of climate tech investments actually happens before the proof of concept, and there's so much of investment that happens earlier. There's a lot of innovation that happens. A lot of it is B2B, and a lot of it is the real investment and the mandate that the founders and the entrepreneurs are working in. It's very exciting. And so today we have a very interesting panel because it represents three different constituents of the whole ecosystem. We have Marko from Stargate, a hydrogen startup, who has kind of worked with his team to build something from scratch over the last few years. We have Sophia from BP Ventures, somebody who has supported the startups in actually making this kind of come to real and to life. And then we have Mariarosa, who represents NGV Italy, who actually focuses on an association which helps corporates to work with startups and how to go about it. So very interesting mix. We would like to hear opinions from each of them. But before we start, Marko, can you make life real for everyone here, saying that what is the life of a climate tech startup like? How does it actually work?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Marko. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Stargate Hydrogen. So we are a company that builds electrolyzers and develops electrolysis technology. And I think life in a deep tech startup is definitely challenging. And what is important is that those challenges are always changing. So when we were just starting, the main focus was on the material level developments and getting those validated. Then as we got this done, the next challenge was to get from a material level, from our innovation to a full commercial product. We got there last year after many struggles. And now we are in a phase where we have commercial projects, and the challenge is executing those projects and at the same time in parallel scaling up the production. So there's always challenges. Those challenges are changing, and I'm sure in the future we have many more different challenges.
Very interesting, Marko, because and Sophia, you have looked at this world as an investor, as a board member, but I also know that you come from a consumer background in the where you started your career, which is very, very different. So you looked at a world from a Coca-Cola, a Unilever world heritage, and now with BP Ventures you're investing in climate tech, which is very, very different. So as a venture fund, as a corporate venture fund, how do you look at the startups and their lives?
So I'm in the climate tech VC space, and that's quite different. And the reason why it's different, it's three main areas. The first one is that the founders you're dealing with, like Marko, they're absolutely mission driven. They want to save the planet. They want to leave the world a better place for their kids and their grandkids. It's very different when you look at VC in a non-climate tech space. And then the other point that's quite profound too is that the problem isn't going to be solved by creating another app. The problems are going to be solved using engineering talents, using other talents, because it's not an app that's going to solve the energy transition challenge. So it's quite a different outlook. And the other point around, let's say, the climate tech VC space versus other VC spaces is that today you've got energy. You've got energy, it's affordable, it's reliable, it's convenient. So you already have energy on offer. So whatever you're creating to make it cleaner or greener, you have to make sure that it's as affordable as it is today, and it's also convenient, and it's reliable as well. And so that creates a lot of different challenges, which of course I think makes, for me, it's been the most exciting, what I call third midlife crisis of my life. It's a great place to be in. Yeah.
I like it. I think, Marko, honestly, as a consultant, I always feel that I'm not as risk taker as you would be, right? Like literally a missionary. And Maria, coming to you, one question I had. You work with a lot of the corporates as an association, help them to make world a better place, and work with like startups like Marco's and others. What's the role these associations can play? Because it's a very, very tough journey that a lot of these climate tech startups would have.
Sure, sure. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think that the first suggestion I will give to everybody is to look at neutrality. Right now, too much, especially in Europe, is focalized in just one source and just one decision and so on. And I've been following very carefully what the Prime Minister Modi and my friend, let's say, Minister of Oil and Gas, Hardeep Puri Singh, and I find a perfect attitude. Well, we are really talking the same way. Today, everybody is eager for energy, and countries like India need energy. I come from Italy, we need energy because we don't have much. We don't have much solar, so we don't have our own gas or our own fuels, and we are looking for new solar and renewable energy. However, I think that we have to keep in mind the word decarbonization. And decarbonization, that it's a word that not so much used anymore, means that we have to use everything that is going to be emission zero emission, and to use it in order to reach this goal as soon as possible, without being ideological, but being pragmatic. So that's what I would say to UP, I would say to young people. They have to look with open mind, not just focusing on one single source. In my position as president of the largest association in Italy, where we have on board Eni, Snam, Iveco, all the big players in industry and distribution, I have all sorts of energy. They have electrical, they have fuel cell, they have CNG, LPG, LNG, and hydrogen. So that's the way to look at, and that's the way to ask the young people to work on it.
Very interesting. You were saying we have missionaries in the climate tech, like people like Marko, but don't be blind followers of those missionaries. Work in a pragmatic way with all these followers. That's a very interesting, I would say, a dimension to look at. But again, Marko, coming to you, one question which I always struggle, right? As I always debated about quitting my job and being an entrepreneur. And especially in climate tech, I always, it's more stressful. So you've been in the journey for almost 5 years, I think, right now. Yeah. Tell me some moments of truth, right? Where you really said, okay, shit, there's a big problem and you really need help. And somebody from the VC world or the corporate world actually stepped in to help, because a lot of the audience is from the corporate world. So where are those moments of truth? Some stories, maybe.
Yeah, it's true that I think the biggest challenge is that in deep tech and hardware sectors, things just take more time than in software. So I had a previous business in software, and in software you can get the MVP to the market in a few months. But in the hardware world, it's simply not possible, because you're building physical products. And as you mentioned, it's definitely a challenge to kind of ensure the motivation of the team during this period, to ensure the financing during this period, and at the same time in parallel create commercial traction. But if I think about the kind of the milestones or where things got easier, it's all related to technology validation. For example, one of the first key milestones for us was to get the material and cell level technology validated by the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, independent institute. The next important milestone was getting the stack, the first product, validated by an independent institute. So these milestones, first of all, they generated a lot in investment interest into the company, also interest from our existing investors to keep supporting the company. And on the other side, they also generated a lot of commercial traction on our commercial side of the business. So you need to hit those milestones and need to have those moments of smaller and larger successes in order to keep thriving.
That's interesting. I could literally visualize you talking to your sponsors in the sense of the fund people who invested in your startup and actually having this conversation, and can imagine it's a very challenging one. Sophia, one question I always struggle with, and a lot of the people out here in the room are, corporate clients who actually always debate about putting their own venture, like the way BP has created a fund. You use your part of your profits to put money into a lot of these startups, which will drive the future of energy. What is the role funds actually play in this whole setup, right? It's not just about the money, but there are a lot of other things. So can you just help some examples? I know you've invested in Blue Smart, Zingbus, and many others. So some stories from there.
So Blue Smart and Zingbus, Delhi, Gurgaon-based companies. So, and we invested in Blue Smart literally when it was not even making $1 million a year. Now it's touching $100 million a year, and that's only been a few short years. What's the role that we've played in the development of these companies? I would say there are three things. One is when the companies come, they've got an incredible idea. They may have had an MVP, they may be making money, but it's how do you then get to that inflection point? How do you scale rapidly? And having access to experts who are actually operators, sometimes in other countries. So like in BP, I helped develop BP's global e-mobility program, and so I could connect Blue Smart to other experts in BP. How do you scale the ride hail? How do you then look at pivoting to other parts of the e-mobility? How do you think about charging? How do you think about other aspects to really build an integrated business? So that's something which we bring far beyond cash, because cash is one thing, it's the expertise. And then the other area is around access to the ecosystem, the bigger ecosystem. So last night, the founders for the three companies, we had a little dinner event, and we had some investors in the room, and collectively, those investors have $50 billion to deploy. Okay?
That's awesome.
Billion. Okay? So the access to other investors to help these companies scale is another area where I think we've, let's say, bring value to the young company. And then the third area is around providing that sort of commercial partnerships that the company needs. So, for instance, EV charging infrastructure in India is really tough, but utilization is still quite low relative to other parts of the world. You don't necessarily want these young companies, so this electric bus operator, Zingbus, you don't want these young companies saddled with expensive assets. So what you do is you use other people's balance sheets to help get these companies to prove out and scale up faster. And so that's let's say, the value that we have brought, and I think other startups are seeing that, okay, let's talk to BP because we can help. And it's not that different. I think many of the corporates in the room don't just think about what cash you have in a fund, but what else you can offer from within your organizations to help these young companies scale up as well.
Oh, very interesting, because I'm actually picking many interesting themes, right? Missionary, pragmatism, network effect, what you're referring to in multiple ways, right? Through the other startups across geographies, funds, also in terms of balance sheets that they're able to leverage. One thing which also becomes important in this setup is the role of the government. And Maria, from your interactions with the regulators, what role can government play in a lot of this?
Well, let's say that Europe, and especially Italy, is the hub of regulation, standards, ISO, and so on. We're really tough. And of course, first of all, we put on top security, because security is extremely important. No matter what happens, right now we are talking, before we were talking LPG, very low pressure, that we went CNG, higher pressure. Now we are talking about hydrogen, high pressure. So any accident that would happen, it would stop for a long time the market. So what I'm emphasizing all the time is to understand that quality is extremely important. And when we talk about cost, of course, quality is expensive. And that's one of the problems in countries like India, where sometimes it's more important the cost than the quality. I understand. I've been working in India for the last 35 years, so I love the country. I spent a good part of my life in the country. I'm very, very proud of what happened in India in the last 15 years. I am a witness how Delhi, Mumbai, any Chennai, any also small villages, they were years ago. I remember years ago when before entering a room, an hotel room, you had to take your shoes off. And they would clean your shoes, and that's the dirt that was around. But as I think Minister Puri said today, one of his colleagues from Japan, he went around and he said, well, I don't see any dirt around. What happens? He was. I said, well, India's changed, and that makes it great. That's what they needed. So anyway, standards, regulations are extremely important. They have to be used, although with common sense, because sometimes standard and regulation are old, maybe they don't get along with innovation, with the fact that now everybody has more expertise and so on. And that's very important in order not to stop a market. Something else that I would like to say for India, and India is the second CO2 emission players in the world. And it's growing because as the industries is growing, CO2 is also growing. So they need to, decarbonization in India is extremely high, and India can do it and can reach it if they really follow in a very efficient way, just like the minister said today. They need efficiency, and then India will be great. Last night I promised to some of my stakeholders here in India, we have to help India to become India great and green, and that's very important.
Yeah, fair. I think I think if I had to summarize what you said is, the role of government is to create a very enabling environment. India has an opportunity to create the right enabling environment, and you're seeing that happen over the last few years. Sure. Because you've been a regular visitor to India. But and very interesting because Marko, this is your first visit to India, right? Yeah. So one question, right? And hydrogen, we always talk about hydrogen in India, and you've been in the startup world. If you're to look at India climate tech startup scene or advise the India startups in this space, how do you look at them? Because what have you seen in last 1 week, and now you have an India partner as well, right? That you kind of working closely. And to the point Maria was making, the standards, for example, for hydrogen in India are very different from what there will be in Europe. So what is the advice for any startup trying to build a play in a global setup out of India?
Yes, I think for us as a European company, so 95% of our business is in different European countries. So coming out from Europe and into the Indian market, what is really critical is to have a strong local partner. Otherwise, I think it would be rather impossible to enter the market and gain any meaningful market share. And it's true that yesterday we officially signed the partnership agreement with our local partner here, BGR Tech, and we are already building the first physical project here to have hardware on the ground, because in the energy space everyone wants to see and touch the hardware. So that's why we're starting from building a real physical product here, and then this is our stepping stone into this market.
Interesting. So partnerships are very important, and that's where some kind of what Sophia is mentioning, the network effect some of them can bring is very important. And Sophia, you've been to India often, and I think what I heard you tell me before the session that you're in India almost 5-6 times a year. Yeah. And you're part of so many of the boards on the startup space. What are the big themes that you see for an India climate tech scene? What are the 2 or 3 big themes where you'll say, okay, this is where if I have to do a startup, where should I start putting my efforts?
Well, I think, what I see as well, more and more, is that you're not just seeing the companies coming up with an idea and trying to sell it to you. It's a very capital constrained place that we all live in, and frankly, I think India is great already. Okay, So just wanted to say that. So I think you're seeing more and more companies or young companies with ideas coming to say, what problems are you trying to solve, as opposed to coming with an idea and trying to sell it to you. And I think, so a lot of people say, oh yeah, you're the e-mobility queen because you've been investing in mobility. But I think the electrification of transport is, for me, the single most important thing that has to be done in the next few years, because of the amount of congestion on the roads, the high CO2 per parcel for things moving, and also just moving people around when car penetration, EV penetration, vehicle penetration is still very low. So for me, the electrification of transport is a no-brainer. And I see India already leapfrogging other parts of the world, in that people start with no vehicle and all of a sudden they have an EV. And I think that's the way that this country is going to evolve from a, let's say, electrification space. I think bioenergy is we talk a lot about bioenergy. We're still scratching our heads a bit on how do we solve for a problem that is not concentrated but hyper-local. And how do you ensure that you can bring modular forms of technology and process solutions to be able to solve this problem that is, there is a lot of waste that needs to be converted to something useful. Because this country doesn't have as many raw materials as maybe other parts of the world. And actually there's a lot of waste that can be put to good use. So I think there's a lot of opportunity areas. And what I see a lot of young companies doing now, and I see more and more, is how to connect all of the IoT devices. And I don't mean software, but how do you start integrating? So you put EVs on the ground, that's fine, and then you have charging infrastructure. How do you then put the renewable power, so the power is not just coal going into the vehicles? Yeah, and then integrating that. So I see more and more that being an area that would be really good. As from the power, that's the transmission piece, and then that's also to ensure that what people are using, you're not adding more pollution to the streets and to the air.
Well, very interesting. Well, one thing we always struggle in the energy transition discussions is, yes, it's a wide space. There are so many things happening, but when you actually come to the investable business cases, they are going to be limited. And I know before this panel started, you and Marko were having a debate on hydrogen. Maybe you want to give your point of view on hydrogen as well, and how do you think of it before I go to Maria for something else?
I better not.
Okay.
No.
Just joking,
I'm being funny. I think hydrogen is a molecule that permeates steel. It's a very, let's say, dangerous molecule, has to be managed carefully. And before we start creating new and new molecule supporting systems, let's use what we have already. And I think hydrogen as a fuel source, as a decarbonizing source, as a way to convert, to get some of the rubbish stuff into more productive assets, it's really at the industrial clusters that we should be focusing most of our hydrogen projects.
That's great. And Maria, you talked about the fact that you've been to India for last 25 years, year after year, and you also have been part of a lot of the European conversations. What are some of the best practices you feel India can adapt or learn from your other experiences?
Well, first of all, I agree with what my friend just said, and congratulations. Well, I appreciate, and we will keep in touch in any case. And what I wanted to say, the last message with my experience, well, to be sometime they call me opposite young. They used to call me the mother of CNG. Very soon they will call me the grandmother of hydrogen or so on. But anyway, I'm still around because experience is very important. And so what I wanted to say is that my last message for India is that, first of all, they should try to harmonize the regulation they are using. One of the problems is that we have UL, we have ECE, ONU, and so on. Everybody is ONU. And sometimes in India they don't accept it. They want to have their own regulation, and that makes it more expensive for time, for money, very difficult. So my hope is that India, that is a very old country, but is still a young country, we would consider a young country, takes experience of what's happening, of the mistakes we have made. when I talk to my Indian friends, I say, well, we are important not only for the know-how or the knowledge we can bring in, because they are extremely bright and they could do it by themselves. You have to take care of the experience of the mistakes we have made. And that's something that you don't have yet. Well, they have some, but not yet. So that's my wish for India, to grow fast, to go very pragmatic, like the minister is, well, they wanted to do, both Prime Minister Modi. By the way, Prime Minister Modi, he signed an MOU, very important, with our Prime Minister, Ms. Meloni, about sharing knowledge and know-how. And I was in Goa last year for the G20, because Italy is one of the main sponsors for the G20 Alliance. So I hope that all this is going on rather fast. Sometimes in India they are quite slow. Sometimes I spend more time waiting for people than working. And I'm used to the opposite. So that's what I'm asking to my Indian friends. Let's go on. You can make it very well. You are very intelligent. You also have the economic possibility of incentive, because nothing will be done without incentive, huh? Especially when we are talking about hydrogen. So that's all around the world. That's a milestone. Nothing at the moment can be done without incentive. So that's my wish to India, and I thank you very much. I've been the third time that I am at the India Energy Week, and I hope to be in Goa next year and see all of you again. Thank you.
No, fair. I think that is very interesting. And so one question, Benoit, and I'll now go in the reverse order, because you talked about coming to Goa next year. What is that, and again, very short answer, but what is that one thing you really, what is that one insight that you picked up at this India Energy Week in this edition? And what is something new that you would want to see at Goa when you're there next year?
Well, I was to go in Goa last year, and it was a mess, because Goa had very narrow roads, no hotel, and so on. So this time they promised me that instead we would go by boat. Everything will change. So instead of 3 hours, it will take 20 minutes. I had a car with a special badge, but still it was 2 hours just to get in. Anyway, I think that DGM is doing a good job, because you can see the number of people, very good organization, and everybody is feeling at home. But that's part of the Indian. Indians are very generous, and they accept you with, smile and so on. And that's something that always get me in my heart. Indian, they smile all the time, even if they have lots of problems. And that's something we have to learn. So I think that Goa will be great.
I'll go one up. So there's a company, a startup in Chennai called E-Plane, run by the guy who runs, Prof. Satya, who runs the engineering. He's developing an electric plane. So I think we need to get to Goa, to the R&D center in ONGC, by electric plane. Let's try and get that.
Perfect. I think there are a few ONGC folks here I can see. They're smiling, saying that we should get it done next year. Marko, from you, what's something interesting you picked up, and what's something you want to see different?
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Marko.
Yeah, I think what was really good to see that compared to some recent events in Europe, there is a lot of optimism, there is a lot of motivation, and there is a lot of goodwill to make things happen, both in hydrogen and also in biofuels in general. And what I heard from the people who have been at this event for years is that it used to be just an oil and gas conference, but every year the share of hydrogen and other biofuels has been growing because of the importance of decarbonization that was already mentioned before. And that was really good to see, and I hope and expect that it will continue also in the following years.
Great. Well, and from my side, I think one thing I picked up is India is an overall energy story, right? There is going to be the traditional energy and the new energy. Both are going to stay hand in hand. We are going to pioneer and push on both the fronts. So that's really exciting to see. And one thing which I would like to see different is maybe we have some kind of a Shark Tank or a lot of participation from the VCs and actually a lot of funding here, because that will be really exciting to create that sense of purpose among so many missionaries out here. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed the panel. We will be around for some discussions if you want to, but thank you.